All right, Joe, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Perfect. I really want to thank you all for having me here. My name is Joe Corkery. I lead the Healthcare and Life Sciences product team at Google Cloud. It's been a really fun opportunity to be there, and I've been doing that for about 6 years now. Before we kick things off, I just want to say a thank you to our organizers. This is an amazing event, and it's a thrill to be able to participate in this. I also want to thank all the many speakers who participated in the Tech Talks earlier this week, as well as the other keynote speakers that will be following this evening. There are a number of themes that the hackathon is organized around this weekend: education and prevention, monitoring and diagnosis, personalized treatment, and management and use of health data. I thought I would use my brief period here to talk about the management and use of health data, because that's something near and dear to my heart. And it's also something that is really critical to consider from the beginning when you're building healthcare applications, digital health, mobile apps, because you can't really bake that in after the fact. You really need to be thinking about how you're handling your health data from the beginning as part of the core design. As you all know, the amount of healthcare data is booming. We're seeing, reports of, growth of 9x since 2016 in terms of the amount of data coming off wearable devices, mobile health apps, telemedicine, as well as various IT. And this really presents a unique opportunity to improve the practice of healthcare, as well as to deliver novel solutions that are tailored and relevant directly to individual patients. Coupled with that, regulatory mandates are driving healthcare interoperability so that healthcare data will no longer remain siloed, and patients will be able to access their medical records, and data sharing between providers and payers and their members and providers and their patients will be much more accessible through an API-based infrastructure. And as the data starts to flow, and in compliance with these new rules, they're going to need scalable storage solutions along with intelligent consent and privacy management capabilities that will be critical for success for healthcare application developers to really be thinking about from the beginning. Earlier this week in the Tech Talks, you probably heard about the Cloud Healthcare API, which is something that we have developed at Google Cloud that provides a serverless managed implementation of the existing mature healthcare data standards, HL7v2, DICOM, FHIR. And it runs on top of Google Cloud and integrates with a number of those key tools, which makes it a great backend for building healthcare applications on, either as a secondary platform for interoperability or as a primary platform for data storage, and incorporates compliance capabilities directly into it, and complies with regulations around like HIPAA, HITRUST, and GDPR. Circling back to this healthcare data opportunity, there's a lot. This growth provides a lot of opportunity, but there's an enormous amount of responsibility to ensure that the data use is happening in a secure, compliant fashion and also respects the user intent. Hopefully you all had the opportunity to hear a little bit more about the Healthcare Data Protection Toolkit, which can be used to automate the creation of HIPAA-aligned deployments in the cloud, creating both production, development, and test environments that are set up and ready to operate in these environments. Now, thinking about the fact that we're seeing more and more users sharing data, concerns about privacy are also increasing at the same time, and many people remain skeptical about how their data is being used and also by whom. And this is something that's really important and should be top of mind for digital health developers and mobile application developers really from the beginning. At Google Cloud, we codify this in our data processing and security terms, something that everybody should be thinking about. But importantly, we emphasize that the customer data is the customer's data. So customer data brought to Google Cloud is only used for the purposes that the customer directs, and the different capabilities around that are codified in these terms. And the data that's brought there is not used for other purposes. We actually even have tools like Access Transparency, which allows this. My phone is talking to me, we also offer access transparency to provide this immutable audit trail for whenever a Google engineer does have to interact with data, usually through a support request. So I want to change gears to talk a little bit more about expectations and compliance frameworks, because as part of this increased expectation around privacy and transparency, you're seeing this being incorporated and reflected in new laws and regulations like GDPR, CCPA, many others. And complying with these can be really challenging, as you're getting started. So you really need to be thinking about how you're handling user data, again, from the beginning. One of the things I'm actually really excited to talk about, and this is something we've actually just only recently released, is the Healthcare Consent Management API. The ability to provide simple, reliable privacy and consent management within the same framework as the Google Cloud Healthcare API. And what we're trying to do here is make it easy to manage the complexity around consent so that you can give more agency to the users of your applications. The API acts as a single truth for user consent, gives the ability to provide granular consents that would otherwise be too complex to provide, enabling you to maximize the utility of the data, but also while working in a consent-respecting process for that data. And finally, to streamline the compliance and facilitate greater consumer transparency about how the data is being used. I'm just going to quickly walk through what that might look like here. So this is an example where you have a privacy officer who thinks about what are the kind of permissions and consents that are going to be required for our digital health application. Then you have an administrator who takes that data, takes the consents and uploads them into the consent management system, can set when they expire, what different options are permitted by the different attributes. You can then load the actual specific language and related forms into this so that they have version control and auditability in the long term. Now, when you actually deploy your application, then you can have your application build in the ability to ask for consent. And it does that by retrieving the consent language from the Consent Management API and presenting that to the user. Then they can select the different things that they're willing to consent to, as well as things that they're not willing to consent to. And your application can then record that back into the Consent Management API, as long as alongside any e-signature that they might provide as part of that. And finally, as you think about how do you keep track of that, so as the application is beginning to collect data as part of the operations from the users, you can register that data along, with the Consent Management API to make sure that the data that's coming in is being tracked against the specific consents. Ultimately, you want to make sure that the data is being accessed appropriately. So let's take an example here where you have a researcher who's thinking about cancer and wants to look at a different types of data that your application might have collected. So they submit that request, and that request can be done through one of your backend databases, which would then trigger a check to the Consent API, check to see whether that consent has been approved. And if it has, that can come back, and then that data can be freed up from the API, from the database, to allow the researcher to access it. So it gives you a really nice flow to be able to control who has access to the data in compliance with the different consent frameworks. Ultimately, then, with your users, you can able to take this information, present it back to them in dashboards within your application, so that users can review what they've consented to, as well as revoke or update that consent over a period of time. And then you can use this to generate reports, when for compliance purposes as needed, to better understand how your application is using data and what consents you've offered individuals around that data. So that's it. I only had a brief 10 minutes. I want to say thank you for having me here and wish you a lot of fun building. I think it's a great event, and thanks for having me.
Great. Thank you so much, Joe, for being here. We appreciate all of your help and your support. So thanks again.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Welcome, everyone. I just want to say thank you so much for being here, and thank you for joining us. It's a very special event. This is our opening ceremony for the legendary MIT Hacking Medicine Hackathons. I am sure that you all have heard about the incredible products and solutions that have come out of these hacks, and I love their mission to democratize healthcare one hack at a time. And we are calling this particular event Building for Digital Health. Quick introductions. My name is Aditi Joshi, and I work for Google Cloud. You've been hearing me all week long on the Tech Talk series that's now posted to the HackMed YouTube channel, so be sure to go check that out. And today, I'm joined by Jessica and Julia. I will let them introduce themselves.
Thank you, Aditi. Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica, and I'm one of the event leads from MIT Hacking Medicine. I'm a senior at MIT studying mechanical engineering and concentrating in medical devices.
And my name is Julia. I'm the other event lead from MIT Hacking Medicine. I am also an MIT student, and I study computer science and molecular biology. We are so excited to see you all here at this event with us today.
And don't go backstage yet, because I want to say a huge thank you to these rock star women right here, because without these two and the MIT team that's been really behind the scenes, all of this would not have been possible. I mean, there is a lot of work that goes behind putting something like this together. It really, truly takes a village to make an event of this size successful and make it appear effortless. So the MIT Hacking Medicine team across the board has delivered and then some. So gold stars all the way around.
Thank you so much, Aditi. It has been a pleasure to be collaborating with you and the Google Cloud team to put this event together.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, now during our 90-minute Tech Talk series, we covered some really important topics. And so I want to make sure that you are well equipped with the tools you need to make this weekend successful. You heard from some of the biggest names in the digital health space, the brains behind the revolution that we're witnessing today, and you got a good sense for how much effort has gone into where we are today over the past few days. So from the professors at Harvard Business School, Boston Children's, MIT, the Kennedy School, Stanford Biodesign, the team at Apple Health, all the great work at Google Cloud, Firebase team, the Android team. I mean, it was a real honor to host the who's who. And most of these talks are going to be made available by the MIT Hacking Medicine team on their YouTube channel. Now, we also provided you a bunch of resources on the MIT HackMed Discord server. So you can all absorb this material when the weekend is over on your own time. We just want to make sure that you are set up for success. So you're probably wondering, like, who's all participating? Take a look at this. 45 different countries have taken part all week long and will be there all weekend long. And now take a look at the different backgrounds of these participants. I mean, it is really impressive. Okay, so now I know we have a lot on our agenda. We've got the keynote speakers. Thanks to Joe for kicking us off. We have a special Q&A lined up for you and a couple more keynote speakers. I think it's going to be a real treat. We'll take a short break. Then we'll do a design thinking and hack 101 workshop. We'll do category challenges. And just to close it all out, we'll do problem pitching and team formation. And just like we have been, you guys know the drill now all week long. All the conversations are happening on the Discord server, #discuss-kickoff for this particular event. All right, now let's get started with our special Q&A. I want to introduce you to Justin Larkin and David Hindin, which I'm going to bring to the stage. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi there. All right.
Hey.
So thank you so much for being here today. Let me just kind of give you a quick background, and then I'll kind of hand it over to them. Justin is a partner at Andreessen Horowitz. Justin and I were in many of the same classes at Stanford, including healthcare investing, the biodesign program, and others. We almost like had the exact same schedule. So it is really great to see you again, Justin.
Likewise, thanks so much for having me.
I'd love for you to kind of give us a little bit of a background about yourself, especially when it comes to health and innovation. I mean, you just have an incredible resume, and I think the audience would also love to hear about your journey as a whole.
Yeah, happy to. And first off, DT, thanks so much for having us. I'm super excited to be here. This is very nostalgic for me. Back in grad school, but the med school and business school, is super active in the hackathon community, participated in this hackathon, the Penn Apps hackathon, a lot of them, and actually met my co-founder of the company I ended up founding through the hackathon. And so it's just amazing to be back part of the ecosystem and see how much it's evolved since then. There's no Google Cloud platform presence back then, nor CardinalKit, nor any of these Apple APIs that make it, I think, so interesting to build today. So kind of getting back to your question. So yeah, as you alluded to, I'm now working as a health tech VC at A16Z, helping to focus on really things that impact care delivery. So anything that kind of ultimately impacts patients or providers or payers in that mix. And I've had the privilege of working in a number of really formative environments, from taking care of patients to starting a company to working in big tech. And then ultimately, most recently here in VC, which I think for a lot of folks is probably a fairly non-traditional path for a physician to take. But for me, at the end of the day, really the common thread has been really being fixated on this long-term goal of having impact on patients at scale, but really being flexible and kind of curious about the path that has, that I've followed to get there. And for me, I see a massive opportunity really for purpose-built, patient-centric technology to scale impact on patients in ways that a lot of kind of legacy care models can't. So super excited to see what comes from this weekend, and really excited to get to track along. But thanks again for having me.
Great, thank you. And then also Dr. David Hindin is a surgeon at the VA in Palo Alto, and he's also a former Stanford Biodesign fellow. So David, do you want to share a little bit about your background as well?
Sure. Would you like me to throw my slides up in the screen?
Yeah, that would be perfect.
All right, let me put them up real quick. All right, there you go. Perfect. So very quick introduction myself, and also I figured I'd take 2 minutes to try to give you guys a quick rundown on biodesign and give you a couple tools that you can sort of take with you these next couple days and sort of apply to the work that you're doing during the hackathon. So my name is David Hindin. As Aditi mentioned, I'm a surgeon by background. And my whole life in med school and then residency, I really felt like something in sort of traditional medicine was kind of missing for me. I suspect it may have been similar with you, Justin. I kind of felt like a plant without water. So for me, I really felt like the creativity was missing. I started off by sort of building out a YouTube channel, and eventually I found my way to the world of innovation. And most recently, I was lucky enough to be part of the Stanford Biodesign Fellowship. So for next 2-3 minutes, I'm just going to share a little bit about the special sauce from the sort of biodesign process and how I think you might be able to apply it over these next couple days. So here on the screen, we see each of the components of the biodesign method, the biodesign process. This takes about a year to go through during the fellowship. We have about 3 to 4 minutes right now. So we're just going to focus on the green part, which is really kind of the secret engine to biodesign. So we like to talk about the need as being really central to the best invention. And what biodesign says is, contrary to coming up with a cool piece of technology and trying to see what it might be useful for, you're going to be much more successful if you start with the problem that the patient has. And that's, a philosophy that a lot of us are already on board with. But biodesign then takes that and goes a couple levels deeper and says, look, think of the problem as an onion, and the real gold here is if you peel away the layers and you get to this really unexpected insight at the very core. And if you tweak this one little thing and solve this one tiny need, you fix the whole thing. And so this is something that's been proven by Biodesign. They've been around as a fellowship for about 20 years now. These are 2 of the bigger exits that Biodesign companies have had. And then there are many, many more companies that have come through Biodesign and been a success. And one of the numbers that I love is 5% was the number that I heard recently as sort of the failure rate of Biodesign companies, which is really special, I think, in the startup world. So none of this is to brag about Biodesign, but it's to sort of show you how using these tools and really sort of being diligent to stick with them can really give you a great return. So as I mentioned, this is a very brief glimpse at how to do some of this. And really the engine to biodesign and the engine to sort of the success that a lot of these insights have tapped into is what we call needs statements. So a needs statement is a way of sort of distilling down the opportunity in a problem, distilling down that special little corner that once you solve it, fixes the whole puzzle. And the way we use needs statements as a tool is we build these statements that are sort of a triangle of problem, population, and outcome. And as we talk more over the next couple minutes, you'll see how we sort of twist that to get a little bit more nuance. But I have outlined here on the screen each of these components. And usually the outcome is a way of measuring your success, but the problem and the population are where you can find a real insight. And if you find a really interesting look at the problem or a really revealing subset of the population, sometimes solving that can unravel the whole problem and be the real insight behind your whole company. So this is a very basic example of a need statement that my team had put together early during the COVID, the early COVID crisis, when we were trying to understand some of the problems that were a little bit beyond just, having enough face masks and things like that. And now kind of flying through things, once you have your need statement, you're going to have a bunch of need statements. You may have dozens, you may even have 100 even this weekend. And so, of course, the next step is figuring out how to pick one. And on the right-hand side of the screen, I put here a couple different filters that we call them that you and your team might come up with. None of these are correct or incorrect, but they're a useful way to sort of decide as a team what your priority is. Do we want to go after the biggest market? Do we want to go after the orphan diseases that no one has paid attention to? You'll sort of decide together and choose that way. And then finally, once you've started to distill all of this down to a couple really exciting needs, we talk about something called needs criteria. And these are basically what become your checklist for when you brainstorm. So here's an example sort of map at the top of the screen where we have a need statement. And then on the left and the right, we see examples of needs criteria. And what you do is you brainstorm, you come up with lots of ideas, lots of possible solutions, and then you check these needs criteria. And if it doesn't fit the needs criteria, that's a way that you can know you can take out that solution and move on to the next one. So that's really it. The next step is brainstorming. I'll let you guys kind of take it from here. And please keep in touch. Feel free to reach out, ask any questions. And I'm just really honored to be part of this discussion this weekend. So thanks for having me.
Perfect. So let's start with our first question. Justin, maybe you can take this one. What are some areas in medicine that you think are really ripe for innovation right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the short answer is there are so many, which, I think is just a statement of the inefficiencies inherent in the system that I think aren't new and have really existed for decades. But I think there's also just a really special moment in time right now where there are so many technical inflection points, so many regulatory changes on the data fronts, but also on kind of reimbursement fronts with various new technology-enabled models that just create such a unique window in time for us to build really amazing products and companies as well. And, just thinking, there are numerous areas that I'm spending a lot of time thinking about, but a couple of things that I'm particularly excited about is really at this nexus of the explosion of the opportunity around kind of virtual and home-based care models. So it's not, a new idea to have nurses come to the home. It's not a new idea for, folks to call their docs, but really, we're seeing just a maturation of these care models in ways that we haven't before. And what's interesting is that this explosion has really highlighted the challenge of building and scaling virtual care models. So not just the technology components of that, but how do you get the docs or nurses or whomever that you need on there? How do you get them licensed? How do you get them credentialed? How do you do the reimbursement for that? And so just as we saw, GCP and AWS and Shopify and Stripe and all these amazing platforms emerge to enable innovation in a lot of other aspects of the technology ecosystem, we're starting to see a similar kind of tech stack emerge for virtual first care, which we're super excited about. So thinking about what are the components of the tech stack, of the services stack that enable really this next generation of care models is something I'm super excited about. And I think, closely related to that is, I think a lot of us recognize that virtual and, telemedicine to date has really kind of just been what I would call like virtual urgent care, where you go because you have a really just specific complaint, you just need a medication, or you just need someone to tell you that you're okay. But it really, I think has fallen short of what a lot of us had hoped for and anticipated with virtual care. And so I think one of the areas that I think is really ripe for innovation is thinking about, certainly there are limits to virtual care, but how do we build kind of the version 2.0 or 3.0 where virtual care is more purpose-built, where it's more longitudinal, where it's more focused on specific needs of populations and not just being kind of an urgent care stop for patients. And at the same time, how do we do that in a way that's super clinically rigorous and helps patients to get better and ultimately to have impact? And so it's a couple areas I'm really excited about. I could go on. And if folks want to find me on Discord and jam on this, I'm always happy to brainstorm, but a couple of areas I'm spending time.
Great. David, I want to give you an opportunity to kind of give a response as well.
Yeah, I mean, that was brilliant. I mean, I really couldn't have said it better. I think a lot about, I like how Justin put it as virtual health and telehealth 2.0. And I mean, we have these tools that we can start to sort of enable, an interaction between a doctor and a patient, or, a provider and a patient. I think the next step is finding a way to make it feel more human. And, I have often thought of these tools as sort of not as good as being in person, but when you take a step back and you think about it, seeing someone in their home environment when they're not sort of on your sterile exam table, sort of stripped down to a hospital gown and very one-dimensional, there's a new kind of richness that I think we could tap into that we actually didn't have available to us in person. So I just think that we're sort of scratching the surface of what's possible right now in telehealth. And then along the lines of what you're talking about with data and sort of starting to really leverage data, I think there's this incredible potential to start unlocking hidden insights about people's health, about sort of individualizing and tailoring healthcare from one person to another, and really improving outcomes as we start to do that.
So let's say you have an idea. Like, how do you know it's a good one?
Well, I can here. I'll kick this one off. I think first of all, when you have a great idea, usually it's great because everybody else is telling you, or you're starting to hear it from a lot of other people. But one thing that I have always been encouraged is, as you start to have ideas, or you think you might have a good idea, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with people, ask questions, go to the people that you think would most benefit from your idea and see if it's interesting to them, and really start to validate that kernel of what you think is something special.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think David's slides before, give a beautiful process for how you can really make sure that you're not kind of starting with a solution that's, a hammer looking for a nail. To get the end of the day, validating ideas is really a question of, are you solving a fundamental need? And frankly, ideas are pretty easy to come up with, and oftentimes not all that novel. But I think what is really novel is when people start to unpack those ideas and think about, what is the root cause problem that I'm really trying to solve here? And how can I quickly and efficiently validate that? And going out and starting to talk to various stakeholders. So not just end users, but the folks that, are the eventual customers, which in healthcare, we kind of face, I think, this really big challenge where often the end user and the customer of a product are totally different. And you have to somehow kind of weave, that fine line between the two, where you have to solve, build a product that people love to use, but at the end of the day solves a problem that someone's willing to pay for. And so I think it's just spending the time up front to do your homework, to do the customer discovery, to do the contextual inquiry, all these kind of buzzwords that you hear so much around hackathons, but it's worth it at the end of the day.
So that's a great segue into what's the composition of an ideal team? What should you be looking for?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick off on that one. So it's interesting. I think, so often the focus on the ideal team is who is on the team, which I think is a critical component to that. But having spent a lot of time in hackathons and also having built a company and having watched a number of founders kind of go through that process, high performing teams are as much about the exact who's on the team and the composition of the team as it is about how the team, what their process is and what are their norms and how they function together. And so what I would say is that I think it's important to really strike the balance of both and being intentional about who's on your team, but also up front setting kind of the culture and norms about how you guys work together, or how you and, the rest of the folks on the team function. And so, from a team composition perspective, I think for me, it's looking for folks that bring different perspectives, different technical expertise, different clinical or operational expertise, but especially at weekends like this, people that have kind of a bias towards action and a bias towards building. And I would add, as a non-technical founder on my team, building can mean more than writing code. I think it's just people that are willing to be kind of general athletes and really do work, over the course of a weekend or in building a company. And then kind of on the process front, I think it's important just for folks to align on how you like to work together. What does success look like for you? What are the goals you have in this? What are the norms around communication? How can you kind of make the most of the weekend or the most of building a company? So it's, it's not an easy answer, but it's, I think there are lots of different teams that can be highly successful if they kind of optimize on those areas.
Yeah, I agree with all the above. I think absolutely, like you said, it's great if you can have a builder on a team and someone who is, maybe more of the end user, or someone that can sort of give input, and someone who has a different perspective. But at the end of the day, having respect for each other and having sort of ground rules for engagement that everyone's aligned on really makes the biggest difference. And I think it's interesting, Biodesign, many of you may know, has a psychologist on staff that for the fellows actually works with the fellows throughout the year and actually works with the faculty on their interactions. And, I know many large companies do, and that's not something that is useful for a hackathon, but I think it really goes to say that investing in relationships and working together and being respectful has a huge turnaround for the ultimate productivity of what a team can put forward.
One last question. Justin, as a VC, what do you look for in a good pitch?
Yeah, that's $1 million question, or maybe in this world, the 20 or 30 or $50 million question. Yeah, it's listen, it's a holistic evaluation process, and it's one that really depends a lot on the stage of the company. You can imagine, if it's two people with an idea on a napkin, the way that we look at that's very different than if it's folks that have had a business that they've been running for 5 years or more. And so, at the end of the day, we're looking for founders and teams that are betting their lives on transforming the world. And I don't say that in like a cliche way. Like that literally is what I spend my day looking to find, are folks that at the earliest stages really want to bet their career on making a difference. And what that ultimately manifests into is really answering the question of like, why these people and why now? Like, and obviously there are other questions we ask in the process, but for me at the early stages, that's where I spend most of my time. And kind of on why these people, you'll hear, the buzzword kind of in the valley here of like this idea of founder market fit, which is kind of riffing on like the idea of product market fit, and this idea that, is this the person that is the best person in the world to solve this problem? And I know, like, I always ask that question myself. I'm like, I don't know that I'm the best person in the world to solve any problem, but you get kind of the spirit of that comment, which is, founder market fit can come from many different things. It can come from your own kind of personal inspiration and lived experience. It can come from having deep technical expertise in an area, or, domain expertise. It can come from having earned what we call kind of earned secrets from having operated in that space for a long time. But at the end of the day, like, are you the person that should solve this problem? And then, on top of that, is there that vision, and are you able to communicate that vision in a compelling way? And for us, that's not just about like nice slides and giving a good pitch, but it's really kind of the early indication of, could this person go out and recruit an amazing team, or could they go out and sell this to hospital execs or to payers or all these kind of notoriously challenging, potential customers. And so for us, that team component and really the vision and really the fire behind the entrepreneurs is so important for us. And then I would say the one other thing on the founder front is just velocity. Like, we want to see people that are motivated, that are out there working quickly, that are ones that they'll put goals on a slide and then you could check back in a few months later and they've done more than that, just because they're so driven to solve this problem. So that's kind of the first major bucket, and especially like at the early stage, especially coming into a hackathon, like that's how I look at, how we think about pitches. But the other piece that I'll add, because I think it's relevant to picking problems to hack on here at this hackathon, is the why now piece. Which, it's important for there to be a big market opportunity. It's important for there to be, certain technical trends and things, but it's really asking that question of yourself, like, why is there a unique window in time now for us to solve this problem in ways that people that tried a year ago couldn't do, and people that a year from now will be far behind us, for having started late and trying it. And so really answering those questions of like, why this team and why now, are kind of where I spend a lot of my time thinking at the earliest stages of investment. But happy to answer more on that on Discord or somewhere else.
Perfect. David, and yourself, anything to add?
I think I'll step back and let Justin speak for the pitch, because he's the expert there. But all of that sounded totally spot on with my experience too.
All right, we're out of time, but both Justin and David are hanging out on Discord, so make sure you hit them up and ask some questions and just kind of throw some. Are you both okay with that?
Yeah,
definitely.
Totally.
Okay,
and
perfect.
Feel free to find us on Twitter or whatever after the fact, or in Clubhouse if folks are in Clubhouse. We're happy to chat more.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. We're going to keep going. We have Mayank Upadhyay. Let me just bring him to the stage. He's waiting very, very patiently in the back. I have to introduce Mayank. He is the nicest, like, most humble person, just kind. Like, I could just go on and on, but that's the unofficial intro. Let me give you the official intro. Mayank is a Google Distinguished Engineer and Senior Director of Engineering. He has been at Google since 2004. He's responsible for identity on the Google Cloud platform, as well as engineering for Google's Beyond Core portfolio of products. Mayank's team pioneered strong authentication products such as Google Authenticator, two-step verification, and the more recent FIDO UTF standard. Mayank was previously at Sun Microsystems, where he worked on adding Kerberos to Solaris and Java, and later led security strategy and engineering for 2 startups building secure Wi-Fi for enterprises. So that's the official intro, but I'm going to tell you, this guy is so humble. He's incredibly accomplished. No one can tell by how kind and gentle and like nice he is. So with that, Mayank, take it away.
Well, thank you, Aditi, for that kind introduction. And for those of you who are fans of WandaVision, yes, I do exist in color. That was the only picture I could find, and I did not want to go out and get one taken in the pandemic. So that's the reason I sent that. And I'm going to switch to projecting my slide now.
Okay, perfect.
There we go.
All right, I see your slides. I'm just going to move them to the podium. There you go.
Excellent. So I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And I thought today, I'd tell you a little bit about sort of my trajectory at Google, my career, and kind of tie it into this topic about health and cloud and so forth. So the thing you're seeing on the screen right now is not a drawing of a swordfish. It is, in fact, my intersection with Google at a couple of different points in my life and how it worked out. It's really funny. I was actually at Stanford University in 1996, and there was a lot of talk about information retrieval on the web. And I poo-pooed it and said, oh, this whole web thing's a fad. I want to go work on security. And so that's exactly what I did. So that was a missed opportunity in retrospect. But I learned a lot, went off to work at Sun Microsystems, as Aditi mentioned, got to do some cool stuff there. And then later on in 2004, when I was looking to make a change, a friend of mine suggested that I look at Google. And I said, they're a search company and I'm a security guy. What use are they going to have for me? And I really had no idea what I was going to be doing. But I did join, and it's a little over 16 years now. But when I think about it, it's been such a wild ride. It feels more like it was 8 years or something like that. So let me tell you a few of the highlights of, that I experienced during this journey at Google. So when I first joined, this was back in the time before cloud existed the way we know it. We still had all of our clusters, which were all around the world, and we had, millions of machines running around in these. And so the project I was assigned to was to work with a bunch of other people in figuring out how to make what's called today a cluster management system, right? So this is how engineers would write some code, and it would get deployed on these machines, and the servers would run. And we used to call this, internally we call this Borg, just because it would assimilate all these machines, make them work the same way, and make it really easy to manage all these things. But this thing was pretty cutting edge. We pioneered back there this concept of, how to run microservices, which are really just your servers broken down into tiny pieces of code, which can do interesting things, run them inside containers, which you may have heard of this term in the cloud world today. Containers is really just a way of keeping these different servers from messing with each other, right? Make sure one doesn't use up all the RAM, doesn't use up all the disk, and doesn't, you've got the security boundaries between them, and do it in a really cost-efficient and secure way. So it's also pretty cool in that if, say a machine goes down and your server has to be moved from one machine to another machine, it does it automatically. And all the other servers that need to talk to it will find it because they kind of know they're automatically routed to the right place. So all of this stuff, and then the built-in security, which I was working on, led to today what was the inspiration for Kubernetes, right? This is probably one of the biggest areas of momentum in the cloud world where a lot of developers are interested. And these terms have all become part of the cloud native lingo. So that was a pretty interesting ride, and it was all in the back end of our data center, the cluster management work that happened, but was a fantastic learning experience. Then a few years later, I think somewhere around 2009, there was another interesting event that happened. And this was back in the day before there were fingerprint sensors on our devices, and Chrome itself was a fairly new browser. And so back then, when you had to sign into the web, you would go to your desktop and you would use whatever browser existed back then, and you would kind of create a username and a password for all these websites, right? Now, of course, you had to keep all these passwords in your head because I don't think Chrome even had a password manager back then. It was something that they were working towards. Maybe one of these accounts was a really important account like your Gmail ID, right? And a lot of stuff you had was saved in it. But what happened if you chose the same username and password on a different website? And let's say by chance that other website got hacked. Basically, what it meant was that all of a sudden the hacker had access to your Gmail user ID and password, right? So we started to see a trend where, because there was some sort of a tipping point where people had so many websites they would have to go to, that all of a sudden they had too many usernames and passwords to remember, and they were reusing them all over the place. So we kind of started to see, more account hijackings on Gmail go up. So we said, okay, we've got to do something about this. And so we thought of doing something which in the industry is known as multi-factor authentication. And we said, okay, we've got to find an easier name for it. So we were inspired by the Texan two-step dance. And we said, okay, this is where Volstad asking users for codes and SMS codes, and we'll call it two-step verification. And it was kind of interesting. We launched this in 2011, but over time, that term, two-step verification, has stuck with a lot of other companies in the consumer world. And I think it's sort of an easier concept that is much more accepted today. Back then, even the banks were not sending codes to users. So this was a way in which we were able to raise the security for everybody without necessarily putting like a phenomenal amount of burden on them, right? Just a little bit of change in their habits and using a more user-friendly name for the process was able to bring about a lot of improvement. But then as time progressed, it turned out that there were a lot of sophisticated adversaries who knew how to phish these codes as well, right? Just like they could phish passwords, they could also make a fake page, which would ask you for a code. And it didn't matter if you were using an app and doing push notifications, they were all pretty phishable. So we decided it was time to raise the bar one more time. And so what we did was we started working on these USB keys, which we call security keys, which were basically like smart cards for consumers to use on the web. And these, instead of having to type a code, you essentially plug the security key into your USB and you press that little button that you can see on the side there. And as long as your browser wasn't compromised, it would talk to your security key and it would authenticate you, and then you were off to the races. So in addition to making the whole experience more secure, it turned out it also made the experience much more user-friendly because people wouldn't have to type these codes anymore, right? And when we rolled it out to our own population inside Google, two things happened. First, people's sign-in got a lot faster. We did a bunch of measurements and we found that on average, people were saving about a minute or two just signing in, right? Which was a really big deal for people because it gets pretty annoying when you have to sign in a lot. Second, in 2018, we were able to come out and say that because of having rolled this out to all of our own employees, we were not seeing any more account compromises of our employees due to phishing. So this was sort of a known solution to that particular problem in our employees' population. We're continuing to make it available to consumers and to cloud customers and other people. One of the things we realized is that a lot of folks don't want to carry additional tokens with them, so we have to find other innovative form factors. But everybody has a phone these days, right? And a phone can talk to your computer via Bluetooth. You can't plug it in, and it's a little. You may not even need to plug it in if you can actually do a secure Bluetooth connection. So these days we've moved the same technology into the phone, and a lot of consumers are signing up to use that. Now, we wanted it to be the case that this is something that worked not just in our browser, and it was available in all browsers and all operating systems. So like everything else that you want to take big, you have to get it standardized. So we started this process in 2013 or so with a standards body that's called FIDO. It took quite a few years and a lot of hard work, but it took about, in 2019, it was finally accepted as a web standard, which meant that all the major browsers were now going to support it. So that was a pretty rewarding experience, just coming up with this idea as a team and then working through a lot of deployments and standards bodies and getting it to a point where it is today. Around the same time that started, there was another big, interesting event that happened, which, there were nation-state attackers who had started to get more active. And folks can go read about something known as Operation Aurora. But this was something which made it pretty evident that the way a lot of companies' networks were set up were not all that secure. The best comparison I've seen is to a half-boiled egg. They all had this really sort of tough exterior perimeter in terms of a firewall, but as soon as you broke through it and you'd get inside, it was it was soft and gooey. Basically, it was a free for all where you could travel inside of the network. So what this meant was that, if you dialed in through the VPN and got through the firewall, or let's say you took your laptop home, you installed a game on it, and then you brought it back to work the next day and plugged it into the network, you had a lot of risk of introducing malware and viruses into the corporate network. And so we took a step back here and we said, okay, this whole pattern about how networks are set up had to be redesigned, and published a few papers on this new pattern that we call Beyond Corp, for going beyond how corporate networks were set up. I'll not get into a lot of the details, but I'll tell you that at the core of it, instead of having just this eggshell-like exterior, what it really meant was you had to create a shield which you would put in front of all the servers you had inside your network. So each and every server had the ability to continually evaluate a couple of things. It could continually see, who was the user who was trying to talk to it. Was this user coming? Was this user well known? Were they using these phishing-resistant security keys I was talking about earlier? And also what kind of device they were coming from. Did this device have the security updates the vendor put out? Did this device have a screen lock and disk encryption and things like that? And based on that, the shield would decide if the user and the device were let through or not. So this particular pattern has become pretty interesting to many companies, and they're all trying to emulate how Google did this so they could do it for themselves. But there's a lot of other stuff that sophisticated adversaries do. You might have heard of SolarWinds in the news recently, and there is something you can do about the whole process of how, as engineers, you check in code, you have the code be reviewed by a peer, then you make sure that somebody who's authorized converts that code into a binary that gets deployed on your servers. But before it gets deployed, this binary gets signed with special cryptographic keys. And then the servers that these binaries run on only accept them if they were signed by the right keys, right? So these are technologies that were also born out of a lot of the Borg infrastructure we have, and now are part of our container products. But this is something which definitely helps a lot. In addition to this, you always have to be careful to do security updates. We spoke about updates to your operating system, to your browser. In addition to that, when you deploy stuff in containers, there's a lot of scanning that happens to make sure that common vulnerabilities which are well known are not present in whatever you're uploading to your containers. And then there's always network snooping. For us, we've had a principle of encrypting data when it travels from you to us or back and forth for a long time now. This has become pretty common in the industry these days. But speaking of encryption, there's also the notion of encrypting data all the way through the stack. So even when it hits the disk, it's already encrypted. So in case the disk is discarded, nobody is able to, and it's destroyed, you've got the extra layer of protection of having the data be encrypted. And then finally, there's new technology that has been recently developed in partnership with many of the hardware companies, where you can actually encrypt data even while it's in RAM. So somebody who might have physical access to the machine is still not able to read that data. So a lot of these innovations have been brought around in the cloud world. I know my colleague Joe Corkery spoke about this earlier, actually, before 2 sessions before. And your data is your data when you bring it to the cloud. And there's a couple of really interesting products that are worth looking at, which help enforce this and give you that comfort. One of this, which we spoke about before, Joe might have mentioned, is this thing called access transparency. And this is basically us giving you an audit trail of anything that was done by a Google engineer or a support person if they were helping debug something on your behalf. And then likewise, as I spoke about this recent breakthrough in confidentiality, this product of confidential VMs allows you to keep your data encrypted even while it's in memory. So these are two interesting trends that I'd encourage you to check out. Now, finally, in closing, I want to say something which actually is not about technology and is more akin to what the previous speakers were talking about. I heard the end of their talk. We've been lucky to live through an era where there's been so many different revolutions, and there's another one at the cusp of happening right now with digital health. And if there's one thing I've learned throughout of this, through all of this, right, it is sometimes it takes a village to come up with the best ideas. And as we race to create these innovations, we should not forget to step back and talk to one another with genuine curiosity and listening to each other, right? Because these are the ways in which these are things we have never done before. And obviously, if you want to get some of these best ideas, this is a really good way to do it. This is how we created many of the standards in security that I spoke about earlier. And I think it's now time for all of you to continue doing that also for digital health as you are doing. In fact, this hackathon is a really good way to develop such ideas over here. And so I wish you all the best for the hackathon. Here's my email ID if you want to reach out to me. I'm happy to interact with anybody over there. Thanks a lot and stay safe.
Great. Thank you so much, Mayank. I know you have to run to a meeting. I just want to say Mayank is one of the hardest engineers. Like, he works the hardest. And also his depth of knowledge in every single end review will blow you away. So I know you've got to get to one at 4:30. So thanks again.
Thank you, Aditi. It was a real pleasure being here.
All right.
Bye.
Great. All right. So now I'm going to bring Jessica to the stage, and she is going to introduce our next speaker.
Yeah, so we have the pleasure to welcome Ruchika Singhal next as our keynote speakers. Ruchika Singhal is the Vice President of Global Health and Medtronic Labs, an internal business within Medtronic with the mission to expand access to healthcare for underserved communities across the world. Previously, she worked at CR Bard as Vice President International and spent 14 years at Medtronic in various roles across strategy, market development, and product development. Ruchika has extensive experience developing businesses in emerging markets and pioneering business models for addressing healthcare needs at the bottom of the socioeconomic pyramid. And she is passionate about mentoring social businesses, healthcare, and also women's empowerment. She holds a master's in biomedical engineering from Johns Hopkins and an MBA from the Booth School of Business at the University of Chicago. Thank you so much, Ruchika, for taking the time to come speak with us. And I'm going to add you to the stage now.
Wonderful. Well, hi, everyone, and thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. Thanks for that introduction to Jessica. Well, I will start a little bit with just sharing my journey at Medtronic and share a little bit more about the work that we're doing at Medtronic Labs. And my hope is that it inspires some, if not a lot of you, to, as you think about digital health and the concepts of democratizing access to healthcare, what does that really mean? And can we expand our horizons to really address the healthcare needs for the majority of the world's population and not just be focused on, the top tier? So just a little bit about myself. As Jessica mentioned, I am not a tech, like a software tech person. I do have a biomedical engineering background, but I've spent most of my career at Medtronic in developing new technologies. I've done a lot of work in neuromodulation, deep brain stimulation, and surgery over a period of time. And I really got into international business development about 10, 12 years ago. And as we started focusing on emerging markets, very quickly started to realize how many people in the world need access to healthcare and how many of those needs we are not even thinking about, let alone try to address. And our leadership about 10 years ago was believed in, and still do believe, that our mission is not just to provide healthcare to rich people in the world, but to everyone. And and really just challenged us to think about how do we think about innovation, how do we think about business models to expand access for everyone. And it started with that and evolved into what we have today, that's called Medtronic Labs, which is our social business initiative, where we really bring together technology. So whether that's point of care diagnostics, digital tools, combined with service delivery on the ground to address communities that do not have access, basically are living in low income settings, or where the government health infrastructures are weak, where we can provide or fill a gap for their healthcare. So, as you guys pick your projects and think about things, I just want to say that, we often have a binary view of the world, in that there are rich people and poor people, but majority of the world's population, like 5.5 billion or more, really live on the borderline of poverty, so to speak, right? So that's that middle income where you're making more than $2 a day, where your basic needs are being met, like food, water, security. And then there's, those of us who shop on Fifth Avenue in New York, and there's, people in the middle. And that 5.5 billion people live everywhere, whether that's, the minority communities that are underserved in the US, the First Nations in Canada, or, slum populations in Nairobi and India. And how do we address their healthcare needs? For the most part, it's the government that is left to deal with that, or the NGOs and the foundations of the world that are trying to support that, but they can't do enough. And it's like, I feel, and our mission has really been that private sector and innovation is the way to really address the needs of that population. And as poverty rates have reduced for this population, really the bulk of the burden of disease is from what's called these non-communicable diseases, which are things like cardiovascular disease, like diabetes, mental health, cancers. It's like we're surviving tuberculosis, but now we're dying from hypertension and stroke. And our healthcare systems in general are really not built to manage health. Our healthcare systems are built to manage disease. And how, the promise of digital health, and when we think about this whole concept of democratizing healthcare, how can these digital tools really enable health for the bulk of the world population? That's really what I hope I can inspire you to think about as you pick your projects and work on those over the next few days. And beyond that, I would say the unique thing about health for me is also that health is a complex subject, so to speak. It's not just about a technology, but really thinking about the entire ecosystem. When you think about awareness, and it's like for a lot of these chronic conditions, people don't understand what it means to have high blood pressure, or if you take medicine and you feel okay, it's like you're fine. Like it doesn't really mean anything. So how do the solutions that you develop, how do they really span that entire care continuum? Everything from awareness and prevention all the way to screening, diagnosis, referring to a physician, managing the efficiency when the patient is in the healthcare system, so to speak, and then managing the outcomes, right? So any solutions that you develop, what is the value that you're creating, whether that's efficiencies in the system and whether that's clinical measurable outcomes, to really focus on that and think about that, and think about the complexity of this whole pathway and the ecosystem that health operates in. And there's a growing space that understanding the social determinants of health, and which is really the place that we live in, like the zip code, the water that we drink, or access to fresh food and vegetables. All of those things are intertwined. So I would say I think a lot of the speakers before me talked a lot about really understanding the need. And I would say there's lots of layers of the onions to peel here, and understanding the ecosystem and designing your solutions, that fit within this ecosystem that is, everything from the patient and the caregiver and the environment that people live in to, the payers and the healthcare providers and the government systems and the regulatory bodies. So really understanding all of that and how you're adding value and delivering outcomes for that entire care ecosystem. So I would say, please think broader than just developing solutions for people who can afford them. There's a lot of people in the world, more than 5.5 billion, and a lot of them, unfortunately, as we've seen through this COVID over the past year, a lot of them are unfortunately in the US as well. And we can do a lot. The digital tools really enable that. I would also say, I think a lot of the previous speakers talked about data and what we can do with that. There's a lot of potential around how do we optimize care. I mean, we don't understand really how the complex systems inside the body work, but can we improve efficiency? I think there's medicine we think of as the art of medicine, and I absolutely believe there is an art of medicine, but can technology start to bring that art of great medicine be more accessible to everyone, so that you don't have to find that one amazing doctor who can figure it out, that more people can have access to that amazing doctor by leveraging the technology, and that we can achieve good outcomes for everyone. So yeah, I think with that, I think that's really all I wanted to share with you today. It's like expand your horizons, think about the complex ecosystems, and think about delivering value and really focusing on the outcomes that you're trying to achieve.
Thank you so much, Ruchika, for sharing about your work with expanding healthcare access, especially to underserved regions. I will now be introducing our next speaker, Shwen Gwee. Shwen Gwee is the Vice President and Head of Global Digital Strategy at Bristol Myers Squibb. He is a recognized pioneer in digital health and health innovation, with more than 15 years of experience leading digital strategy and innovation in commercial, communications, and clinical organizations. Shwen was named a top 40 healthcare transformer by MMNM in 2015 and a PR Week Health Influencer 50 in 2017 and 2018. And he sits on various advisory boards, including Google Healthcare and South by Southwest Health. Over the last 10 years, he has been heavily involved in the health tech startup ecosystem, from organizing annual startup events and pitch competitions to supporting healthcare hackathons as an alumnus of MIT Hacking Medicine. Thank you so much, Shwen, for being here, and we will now bring you up on stage.
Great, thank you so much, Julia. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to everyone, depending on where in the world you are. I'm actually coming to you from Boston. I'm hoping you're enjoying yourself so far and enjoying all the talks. I'm really excited to be here, having participated as well as organized some of these hackathons with the MIT Hacking Medicine crew, and really excited and proud to represent them as well as BMS as I share with you a little bit about why you should stop trying to be innovative. I'm not sure if my slides are showing now. I think they are, but I want to just make sure. Here you go. Okay, great. All right, so in the next 15 minutes, let me convince you why you need to stop trying to be innovative. But before we start with the actual presentation, let me tell you a little bit about myself so you get to know me. First of all, my name is Shwen, and I've had about 3 iterations in my career. I started off in academic research, spent a lot of time there focused on behavioral neuroscience. And then for the rest of my career, I actually spent it in the pharma industry, both on the client side inside pharmaceuticals, as well as on the agency side at creative agencies supporting healthcare and pharma companies. But the common thread throughout all of these years is that I had digital strategy and innovation as sort of the center of everything I did. And as a result of that, over these many years, what's happened is I've actually learned a lot and developed 3 personal mantras that helped guide me through my career. And the first mantra is actually meeting the needs of other people. Now, what that really means is that when I was first starting off in this space, I was really getting involved with digital and social media, and I started meeting a lot of people online who I was connected to, and most of them were either patients or doctors or people on the provider side, and so on. And what I started to learn was a lot of the assumptions I had based on, syndicated market research and so on, were not always accurate. And hearing from them directly was a lot more enlightening in terms of what are their real needs. And so meeting the needs of other people was really important to me. The second one is we can't solve this alone. And that it comes in two forms. The first one is that healthcare is made up of a variety of stakeholders. I mean, in pharma in particular, the customer, the user, the end user, and the person that pays for it are three different stakeholders. But the patient, as they go through their journey, actually ends up touching each one of these stakeholders. So it's important that we think about not just solving for our own vertical, but what the impact is upstream and downstream. Otherwise, we're just pushing the bottleneck somewhere else. The third mantra, which is pretty self-explanatory, is about innovation is in the hands of the startups. And I think that's pretty obvious what that means, but it doesn't mean that you cannot be innovative if you're not a startup. And I'll get into that later. So if you look at the definition of innovation, what you'll see is that, oh, wait a second. I want to make sure that my slides are still showing. Is that, can I just check if that's working?
Yeah, I think they dropped off in the middle. Do you mind trying to reshare?
Sure, let me do that again. Sorry, I just noticed that.
No worries.
Oh, I'm not sure what happened here. Give me 1 second because I think it's got to do with some of my screen sharing. Okay, let me see if this works now. Okay, let me know if you can see it.
Yep, we have it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. So let's dig a little bit into the definition of innovation. I looked it up online, and the first definition I found said the action or process of innovating. And to me, that's almost as useful as saying, the definition of strategy is to be strategic, right? So what does it really mean? I looked up other definitions of innovation, and another definition I found was a new method, idea, or product. And so let me ask you, with this definition, do you think the baby mop is innovative? Or how about the ostrich pillow, which I think is probably great for those road warriors who travel a lot, but I wouldn't want my client or my boss seeing me in that. Or maybe for those of you who really like the feel of grass under your feet, grass slippers are really innovative. Now, you may say, well, none of these are digital, so obviously they're not innovative. So let's go to some digital examples. How about the connected bottle cap opener? So the minute you pop open a bottle cap, people know where you are and they can come join you for a drink. Is that innovative? Or how about the connected toilet, where you can basically be on the Internet of Things while you're doing your thing, right? Is that innovative? Or finally, how about the Bluetooth tampon, which I decided not to animate on purpose, right? So the question is, are all these innovative or are they novel? And are they just clever and fun? So what really defines innovation, right? But the biggest problem I have a lot of times when we try to innovate, especially from my experience in big corporate environments, is we often jump to the solution first instead of starting with the problem. So my plea to you when you're thinking about innovation is to stop trying to be innovative before you knock yourself out. But if you're not going to be innovative, then what do you need to do? And so my recommendation to you is to start thinking like a startup. And if you need to know what a startup, a definition of startup is and what they think like, then look at what Yvon Chouinard, who is the CEO of Patagonia, what he says about the entrepreneur, who obviously is the founder of a startup. He says, if you want to understand the entrepreneur, study the juvenile delinquent. The delinquent is saying with his actions, this sucks, I'm going to do my own thing. So it's really doing what you think is right to solve a problem. And so what do entrepreneurs do? They hack the planet, right?
Shwen, sorry to jump in again. I think
that's okay.
It's dropped off again. Sorry about
that. That's all right.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Let me try that. Let me know if that's working again.
Yep, you got it.
Okay. Great. You know what I might do is maybe I'll turn off my video. That might help. Can you still see the slide?
Yep, we can see
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna try that. Hopefully it'll stay on. Just come in anytime and let me know if it drops off again.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. So in order to hack the planet, what we're gonna do is take a little lesson from this group that you're working with over the weekend for this hackathon, and really learn from their mantra, which is break it down, build it up, and make it better. So we're gonna learn how to think like a startup in 3 simple steps. So let's start with the first one, right? Break it down. What does that really mean? So this guy, Joshua Schachter, is the founder of a company called Delicious from a long time ago. It was a social bookmarking app. And he says, you have to solve a problem that people actually have, but it's not always a problem that they know they have, so it's tricky. And so the problem is that you need to start identifying the real problems that people have. However, people don't always do what they say they do, what we think they do, or they think they do. And so as we think about how we start to understand the needs of other people, a lot of times, especially in big corporate environments, we think about market research. And market research is really good. There's quantitative market research. You look at segments of people, you understand explicit needs. It's in a controlled setting, and you often have scripted interviews. And what that's really good for is product validation. However, if you really want to get to product creation, to innovations, to coming up with things that can really be useful for people, you need to do research and observation. And that includes qualitative research, looking at individuals, understanding their latent needs in natural contexts, and then seeing their dynamic conversations. And if you think about all that together, where do you think you can find that, especially in this day and age when we are locked down and not able to go out and find people in their natural environments? Well, one of the best places which you can really find a lot of this is online, right? On the web. And so what you want to do, though, is not just look at a few discrete things. You want to look at things like behavior and look at organic behavior online and where people are going, what are they clicking on, what are they searching for. You want to look for intent. What are the key terms they are using and how often are they using it? And then you also want to look at experience, places where people go to complain or to say good things about a product. In fact, a lot of times corporate environments like to shy away from social because they say that's only the place where people go to complain. But the thing is, if you're really trying to solve a problem for someone, you want to hear their complaints so you can understand what their biggest pain points are. And lately, I've also been joining a lot of audio conversations in Clubhouse. If you've tried that before, which is a place where a lot of people come for just organic conversations. And so that's another place where I'm starting to learn a lot about what people's needs are. You also need to try a little tenderness, and need to think and understand what they think and feel, what they hear and see, or what they say and do. And more importantly, a lot of times we forget when we're creating products that we need to understand what our true value proposition is, right? What are the pains and gains and what are their jobs that they need to do in order to use your product? So ultimately, when you want to break it down, what you need to do is really understand and meet the needs of other people. Mantra number 1, in case you forgot. So now let's move on and talk about build it up. Now, building it up is about 2 things that this image really represents. It's about creativity and diversity. But the problem with creativity in big organizations especially is that hippos often squash creative thinking, right? And what do I mean? Do you know what a hippo is? Well, a hippo is the highest paid person's opinion. Oftentimes what happens is, all these creative ideas will come together and then the highest paid person in the room comes in the room and says, we need to do this. And suddenly everybody's scrambling to do that. And so it's not often the best way to be creative and to think different. And so instead, what we need to think about is that it is about diversity. And in fact, Linda Hill, who is a Harvard Business School professor, says, innovation is a journey. It is a type of collaborative problem solving, usually among people who have different expertise and different points of view. And so she really encourages diversity. And so do we here at Hacking Medicine, right? So when we have a hackathon, we often design it in a way that each group is, each table, each team has a diverse set of people together. Because if you bring all the people that think the same way, then you're going to get a very skewed result at the end of the day. So you want a diverse group of people to think differently. In fact, this guy, Franz Johansson, who wrote the book Medici Effect, he says innovation comes ultimately from a diversity of perspectives. So when you combine ideas from different industries or different cultures, that's when you have the best sense of developing groundbreaking ideas. And so here's an example from a book called Not Invented Here, right? It really asks the question is, what would X do? As in, who has already done this before in a different industry that I can apply to the work that I'm trying to do? So here are some examples of what you can learn from other industries. In this case, what did McDonald's drive-through learn from the Formula One pit crew? Or what did the car controller learn from the game controller? Or what did the McLaren folding stroller learn from the 747 landing gear? And so if you really want to build it up, you have to realize that you can't solve it alone, and you really need to think about creativity and diversity. So let's move on to the third one, which is make it better. Now, this is a quote by somebody who you may not think of as an entrepreneur, but certainly knows a lot about survival and building things over time and evolution. And this is Charles Darwin who said, it is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. And so, we often come from a world where we come up with our big ideas, we test it once with consumers, we go towards the big launch, and we think that's the end of the work. But where we really need to start moving towards is the iterative cycle, where we're starting to do little bits of strategy, testing and learning, and then adjusting, iterating, and then testing and learning again, and going through those iterative cycles. And so this guy, Eric Ries, who's the author of a book called Lean Startup, says, over time, pivoting may lead you far afield from your original vision. But if you look carefully, you'll be able to detect common threads that link each interaction. And so here's an example from big organizations that often takes place. In the pharmaceutical industry, this is, and healthcare, I would say as a whole, probably this happens a lot. A lot of people say that healthcare has no moonshots, but truly we actually have a lot of moonshots and a lot of rockets that are going to the moon. And so we launch that rocket, but sometimes, in fact, most times, it's not on the right trajectory and it's not heading towards the moon. And so the smart thing to do, the obvious thing to do, is to actually adjust your trajectory so that eventually it corrects its course and go to the moon. But what do we do in this industry when we think we are right first time and when we launch it, it has to work? We ended up trying to push the moon to the rocket. But the problem with that is that you can pivot a product, but not the user base. And so ultimately, no matter how well you design your product, the users will always define the experience and how they actually want to use your product. So let me ask you, with these three companies, what do they have in common? Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. Well, other than they're all very, very wealthy companies right now, what do you think they have in common? Well, the fact is, every single one of these started as something completely different, right? Facebook was FaceMatch, which was a hot or not competitor. YouTube was actually a video dating site. And then Instagram actually started as Bourbon, which was a Foursquare competitor. And they all learned from their users and what they needed, and they iterated and they adjusted and they pivoted to become what they are today. And they have really established themselves as the foremost platforms in the industry for what they do, right? So if you want to make it better, you have to realize that innovation is in the hands of the startups, but it doesn't mean that you can't be an innovator without being in a startup. It just means you have to think like a startup, right? And so if you really want to innovate, you need to observe, empathize, and address pain points. You need to embrace diversity and learn from others, and you need to think like a startup. And if you want to think like a startup, what you need to do is you need to break it down, build it up, and make it better. And so I'll leave you with a quote by the recent head of design at Apple, Johnny Ives, and he says, it's very easy to be better. Sorry, it's very easy to be different, but very difficult to be better. So with that, I thank you for your time today, and I wish you best of luck with the weekend and the hacking, and I hope you can make everything better in healthcare. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shwen, for your thought-provoking presentation on innovation. We've just hit a short intermission, so take this time to take a quick breather, grab some food, grab some water, And we will see you back in 5 minutes to finish off our opening ceremony with more about our healthcare hackathons, as well as our design thinking process, and some more logistical information about the rest of tonight and the rest of the hackathon. So we will see you back in 5 minutes. Hello, everyone. Welcome back from the intermission. We hope you had a good quick break, and we will now be moving on to tell you a little bit more about MIT Hacking Medicine and our design thinking methodology to help prepare you for the weekend ahead. And then we'll dive into our awards and category challenges, as well as some important logistics. Again, I'm Julia, and I'm joined here by my colleague, Jessica, and we are from MIT Hacking Medicine. So what is MIT Hacking Medicine? Our mission is to democratize healthcare innovation. It's to infect, energize, and teach healthcare entrepreneurship and digital strategies to scale medicine to attack and solve health problems globally. We do this by connecting the best minds in the healthcare ecosystem to solve some of healthcare's biggest challenges. And the main way we do that is through our healthcare hackathon model, which MIT Hacking Medicine has pioneered. When we traditionally think of hacking, we often think of, maybe someone in a dark room sitting in front of a computer trying to break into a system or gain unauthorized access. But hacking in our world is something entirely different. It's a creative application of ingenuity to be able to change the current established system. Now, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the word hackathon, which is what you get when you put the words hack and marathon together. For us, it's what happens when you put a bunch of really smart and passionate people in a room together, virtually in this case, and you get them to try and solve problems. It's going to consist of a lot of teamwork, a lot of innovation and entrepreneurship. And as the name suggests, it's literally a hacking marathon, so it's going to be intense. You guys are going to be working very hard over this short period of time to come together and come up with ways to tackle some of the biggest problems in healthcare. And you would be amazed at the kinds of solutions that get created. We believe that you guys can do it while working together in an innovative manner. Our healthcare hackathons are not like the other hackathons you may have attended, specifically tech hackathons. And there are 4 main reasons for this. First, there's no need to code. We understand that after a whole week of tech talks, you may be feeling excited, but also a little bit overwhelmed with everything, especially if you don't have as much of a technical background. But that's okay. Take the tech talks as something that informs you of the options that could be used in your solution, either now or later down the line. And in fact, it's entirely okay if you don't even have any coding experience at all. We encourage diverse interdisciplinary teams, and we bring it, as you can see, because we bring in people from a wide variety of different backgrounds. And you may have already noticed that too, from interacting with your fellow participants and looking at the roles and ranks they have assigned themselves. The best teams have differing but complementary skill sets. What we really care about is for people to have a problem-centered work that focuses on real user needs, that tackles real pain points, and that solves real problems. Finally, we also really focus on the feasibility and business viability of your solution. We want to make sure that you have the tools and the ability to move forward with and scale your ideas to make them a reality. We have brought our model to over 30 countries, working with partners all over the world to be able to encourage healthcare innovation within their spaces. And our impact has been very widespread. Over the past 4+ years, we've had more than 45 companies come out of our hackathons. They've raised over $175 million in funding, and they've gone on to be funded by VCs such as Techstars, Rock Health, Y Combinator, and more. And more importantly, they've been able to affect real patients and have started real clinical trials. And that's what we're really looking for you to make a real change in the healthcare space. Now I will pass it off to Jessica to talk more about the process that allows us and our participants to have such an impact.
Thank you, Julia, for introducing what MIT Hacking Medicine is all about. So how are we able to support so many successful teams? Let's talk about the bread and butter of our design thinking methodology, which you heard Shwen introduce earlier. Step 0 is identifying the problem. This is critical, but often gets skipped. Next, we get really specific. Step 1, breaking it down, means looking at what are the contributing factors to the problem, who is suffering and why. Understand the stakeholders, everyone that is affected by this problem, and what are the current solutions out there. You're understanding every aspect of the problem. Step 2 is building it up. Once you've understood the factors, you're finding a creative, feasible way that can address these issues. Now, keep in mind, we want this to be a viable business, so we're not talking about rewriting policy, but we're talking about a specific solution that can address a specific problem. Step 3 is making sure your solution is optimal. This means talking to people, seeing where it can break and fixing that. See if it's going to be sustainable, acceptable by, and impactful for all of the parties. To help drive home what this all looks like, especially in the context of an event like this hack, we'll do a quick case study. Many of you may have heard of PillPack. This originally came out of our first hackathon in 2012. In 2018, PillPack was acquired by Amazon for just under $1 billion. Now, what we love about PillPack is actually how they came to their idea, and not necessarily their success. Let's take a look at some of the numbers they were facing with regards to medical adherence. 34 million people, or 1 in 10 Americans, were taking multiple prescription medications a day. 50% were not completely compliant, leading to $188 billion in lost revenue due to lack of adherence. As a result, this contributed to 700,000 readmissions or unnecessary hospitalizations due to complications from poor medication adherence. This is the major theme of the problem. With that information in mind, they sought to distill it down to the major pain point. They saw that the patient wants their symptoms to be under control, but they often have to prioritize work and family over managing their medication. And this actually came from a very personal story. One of the founders of PillPack observed firsthand how his elderly father's arthritis affected his medication experience. Like many others, his father struggled to open pill bottles due to his arthritis. He had limited time to refill prescriptions and was also enduring constant physical pain. These all led to him being reliant on other people needing to open his pill bottles, and as a result, he couldn't fulfill his medication regimen. So having understood the severity of this pain point, the team realized they wanted to build a solution that was centered around improving the patient experience and making their lives easier. So with this identified problem, they needed to break it down. When breaking it down, it's critical to consider who are the stakeholders, what do they need, what do they want. And stakeholders are a lot more than just the patient or the healthcare worker. And here's an incomplete list of some stakeholders that you might need to think about, each of them having their own pain points and needs. For PillPack, patients were frustrated and busy. Their family was worried. Their clinicians could be annoyed. The pharmacy was losing money. Health insurance wants to save money, and the health systems want to avoid readmissions. It's important to understand the complex playing field of healthcare and gauge how your product will help other people in the system. So having understood those issues and the complex playing field, the team moved to thinking about how to create a solution, bringing us to step 2, build it up. So Hacking Medicine has this Mad Libs exercise to help you with building up your project, which will also be shared as a PDF with you all. When filling this out, we're always noting that your solution hasn't been formed yet. You're just trying to gauge what your solution could be. Let's take a quick look at how the PillPack team decided to tackle their identified problem. They identified their goal as improving the experience of patients managing multiple medications. They narrowed down their target customer to young people who may be busy with their career and family, but are maybe perhaps more open to change compared to an older patient population. And they determined that their plan of attack would be to tackle the management of multiple medications. The key takeaway from this exercise is that PillPack effectively narrowed down their scope and picked the right consumers. So with their solution strategy, it was critical for them to next consider how they can fill in gaps existing in the market, which is step 3, make it better. One of the first competitors that they identified was glow caps. It's still in use today by many people. Essentially, it's a cap that you can use to replace the existing caps on prescription pill bottles, and they will glow when it's time to take it. The team found data supporting how glow caps did increase medication adherence, but it wasn't working as well as a long-term solution because some people just kept losing the caps. And it still didn't solve an aspect of the team's original problem, which was to also help people who had limited hand dexterity. Another competitor in the space was MediSafe. It's an app that would send reminders to patients when it's time to take prescriptions, and it would also alert clinicians when patients weren't adhering to their regimen. The team noticed that the patient experience wasn't smooth, with the extra step required to open their phone to indicate that they took the medication, and also adjusting the settings with every prescription adjustment. Patients often forgot to update the app, resulting in false alarms sent to clinicians saying that patients weren't taking their medication. So they observed that many people found this to be troublesome, especially the clinicians. The team hypothesized that fixing pharmacy requires actually building a better pharmacy. They felt that until customers had an alternative to traditional retail pharmacy, no app or smart pill box could truly affect the problem. So they got together cardboard and paper to mock up a new pharmacy patient experience. This picture is their MVP, or minimum viable product, 48 hours into the hackathon. Yes, it is a low-fidelity prototype, but it was able to effectively test and validate the very crux of their idea, the new patient experience. PillPack today now looks like this. They are a full-service pharmacy that delivers a better, simpler experience through convenient packaging, modern tech, and personalized service. Each month, customers receive a personalized roll of pre-sorted medications, along with a convenient dispenser and any other medications that can't really be placed into little packets, like liquids or inhalers. Each shipment includes a medication label that has a picture of each pill and notes on how it should be taken. And the roll of medications are easy to open, allowing individuals with limited manual dexterity to easily open them. They saw testimonies from many patients, especially elderly patients, who expressed that this has really made an impact in their lives. So we all now see PillPack today as a multi-million-dollar company. They were able to get where they all are today because they started with the problem. If there's one thing you can take away from this presentation, start with the problem. Don't start with the solution and get distracted by buzzword technologies like machine learning, AI, and big data before truly understanding the problem first. Then you can break it down, build it up, and make it better. And after all, we're all here because we want to address the needs of healthcare and be truly impactful for the end users. Now I will pass it back to Julia to talk about how you can apply this design thinking methodology this weekend.
Thank you, Jessica, for taking us on that inspiring journey with PillPack. So more about how you can apply this methodology to the healthcare hackathon. As a quick overview, the hackathon process consists of about 6 steps, broken down over this weekend. Right after this, you'll be pitching your problems and then mixing with other participants to form teams. Then tomorrow, you will be hacking and receiving feedback on your ideas. And finally, on Sunday, you will be iterating on your ideas and presenting them. Now let's take a closer look at what this looks like in action. As a disclaimer, all of these pictures were taken from our in-person hackathons, but we've worked really, really hard to translate that to the virtual space so you can get as close to an experience as possible. So after this opening ceremony, you will each be heading into a problem pitching Zoom session in the track of your choosing, where you will have the opportunity to pitch about any problem within healthcare that you're passionate about or that you want to see change for, with track in mind. Then you'll be going into Discord channels that will be made visible following problem pitching, and you'll have the opportunity to mix with other participants who are equally as passionate as you are. And you can talk with all sorts of different people to be able to form interdisciplinary teams centered around real problems. For the rest of the weekend, as you can see, there's going to be a lot of ideation going on. You're going to hack on the problem of your choosing, thinking about all of the nitty-gritty details and how you can address them with a solution. And we provided you with a lot of different resources that will help you think about and break down your problem such that you can build it up and come up with a solution, and ultimately also a business model that will be feasible to be implementable after the hack. While you hack, you will also be receiving feedback from individuals such as mentors in different areas of healthcare and expertise, and the hack team, who will also be helping you improve on your hack and pitch and help you be successful. There will be a lot of iteration that happens. Very rarely do teams come out of the hack with a solution or even a problem that was the first thing they came up with or thought of over the weekend. So just all we ask is for you to make sure that you keep an open mind and are open to changing your ideas. Finally, you will be presenting your pitch in the form of a 3-minute pre-recorded video that judges will be watching and evaluating. Now that you have a general idea of what the hackathon will look like, Jessica will be giving us some tips on hacking and how to be successful.
Thank you, Julia. So over all the years of running healthcare hackathons, we've learned some guidelines from past participants, and we'd like to share this with you guys. In terms of hack do's, we encourage you, do open yourselves to crazy ideas. Do leave your job titles at the door because we all have our unique and valuable experiences to contribute. Seek diverse teams. As you saw, as Aditi presented in the beginning of the kickoff, we have people from all over different backgrounds, healthcare space, tech space, designers, people from business, patients, you name it. And we're all coming together to hack for a strong solution. Don't hesitate to reach out for help. And also, we encourage you to fail fast and change. If you find that you're going down a route that doesn't seem to be panning out, don't be afraid to learn from the failure, ditch it, and try something else. Also, remember to focus your problem, like we saw in the pill pack case study. When problems are too wide or targeting too wide of a patient space, it's hard to come up with a solution that will work effectively. Finally, take concrete actions and make prototypes. Remember, this doesn't have to mean coding something. PillPack's prototype was cardboard and paper, and it was effective in modeling their patient experience. In terms of hack don'ts, don't worry about patenting or discussing ownership. These conversations can take place after the hackathon. For this weekend, focus on collaborating together. Don't develop too broad of a solution. This ties into the idea of having too broad of a problem. Additionally, don't be negative, and also don't be shy. Feel free to express your opinions and ask questions, but also make sure that they won't lead to the detriment of the team by monopolizing a conversation. Have all of your team members have equal say in the development of your idea, and take concrete actions to solve those problems. At the end of the day, a good hack is based on a good story, meets a real need, can be iterated, can be tested, and can be scaled to work with multiple populations. So now that you know how our hackathons work and what makes a good hack, Julia will be talking more about the specifics of what judges will be looking for in your hack.
Thank you, Jessica. The judging criteria that will be used for our overall prizes aligns closely with our design thinking process. And there are 4 main aspects that we emphasize. We want to see that the problem you have identified is a real problem that when addressed with your solution has the potential for widespread impact. We want to see a solution that will work and is feasible, that addresses challenges in an innovative way, and that considers things like user experience, interface, and service design. We want to see that you have a plan for your business model, something that is both sustainable and scalable. And finally, we want to see you have an effective presentation and a diverse team behind it. So moving on to our awards. Our overall awards consist of a first, second, and third place award, where the first place team will have the opportunity to have a team meeting with a Googler. The second place award winners will receive Google Cloud Parkland backpacks. And finally, the third place team will receive credits for Quick Labs by Google. Additionally, each of the overall award-winning teams that are interested in continuing their project will have the opportunity to meet in an initial consultation session with one of our 3 amazing expert mentors who have been so kind to offer their invaluable experience and expertise from working with early-stage startups. There will also be the potential for longer-term continued mentorship afterwards. Now I will hand it off to Brian to talk about one of our category challenge awards.
Brian, I think you're muted.
Okay, there we go. There we go. I promise I know how to work technology. Hi, everyone. My name is Brian. I'm representing Google Cloud. And for this category challenge at MIT's Building for Digital Health, we have the best use of Google Cloud. So for our first place prize, each team of the winning first place will receive a Patagonia backpack and a water bottle. And for the second place team, each member will receive their own Google Cloud swag bundle, which will include a reversible Google Cloud pillow, which is blue and white, and then a Google Cloud beanie, Google Cloud socks, and Google Cloud journal, and also as well some lanyards as well. So pretty cool prizes for everybody. So good luck on that thing. And I think I'm going to be presenting my deck if I'm correct, right?
Yep. Yeah. If you want to just
let me do that. Sweet. Perfect. Awesome. Can everyone see my screen?
You're good.
Okay, awesome, great. Well, let's dive a little bit deeper into what is Google Cloud. As I was saying earlier, my name is Brian. My pronouns are they, them, and I'm part of the Hackathon Operations and Education Outreaching program here at Google Cloud. Our challenge this weekend at MIT's Building for Digital Health is about Google Cloud. So cloud computing is getting things done using someone else's computer. So when you use Google Cloud, you're using Google's computers. How cool is that? So what is Google Cloud? Google Cloud lets you build, host applications and websites, store data, analyze data, all on Google's highly scalable and reliable computing infrastructure. Some of our popular cloud products are App Engine, which help deploy web apps, mobile backends to the cloud, and also Firebase. Firebase is our mobile development platform featuring the real-time database. Some of our databases are Cloud Firestore, Cloud SQL, and Cloud Storage. We also have the Google Maps platform that helps you analyze the data within Google Maps in a series of API formats. I also want to touch base on Google Cloud's machine learning APIs. What's awesome about these APIs is that they help to analyze your data in pre-trained models. So even if you don't have any experience at all, you're simply using the power of Google Cloud. So some of our popular API products are video intelligence, vision, speech, natural language, and translation. So within the Vision API, we also have landmark detection, which helps to detect key figures within your photos. Also as well within the Vision API, we have label detection, which helps to determine what's going on in the photo from a confidence score from 0 to 100%. Also within the Vision API, we have face detection, which helps to determine how many faces are in the photos, as well as analyzing the type of emotion they're expressing from joy, sorrow, anger, to surprise. Also, I want to touch base on the natural language API, which is entity detection, which helps to determine keywords in your text. So for example, we have Pennsylvania, Biden, and campaign trail. Also within the natural language API, we have sentiment analysis, which helps to determine how positive and negative one text can be. Everyone should check out our forum within the Google Cloud channel to sign up to receive $25 in Google Cloud credits. Need questions or need help? Have questions or need help, please check us out on Discord, and we're more than welcome to have a technical one-to-one mentoring via a voice channel or a GVC with you guys. Awesome. Thank you so much, Hacking MIT, for allowing Google Cloud to be a sponsor with you guys, and we're super excited to see all your guys' projects on Sunday and to also review them and all that great stuff. So happy hacking.
Thank you, Brian. Okay. Cool.
We also have a prize for best use of CardinalKit. So if you missed that talk on Wednesday, I highly encourage you to go check it out on the MIT Hacking Medicine YouTube channel. It's under day 3. So the prize basically is Stanford Biodesign t-shirts for the entire team and a mentorship session with Dr. Oliver Alami, who's a vascular surgeon at Stanford. He's also director of digital health at Stanford Biodesign. And also you'll get featured on CardinalKit's website. So it's a really great resume builder. And then we also have a prize for best use of smart markers. I encourage you to check out Tuesday morning's video with Ken Mandel. We'll also do a deeper dive tomorrow for about an hour or so, noon Eastern time on the YouTube live stream, just so that you get a better sense. But there are already a ton of resources that we've posted on the Discord channel, so please do check them out. And the winner will get a $150 Amazon gift card for the entire team, as well as being showcased on the Smart Marker app gallery.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aditi and Brian, for presenting our category challenges. And if any of you want to look back at it, this information is all in the participant handbook that we sent out on Thursday. So now we'll move into just talking about logistics on how you can actually participate in this hackathon and engage with other people. So this participant handbook is your best friend for the weekend. If you haven't done so already, please read it through. Our team carefully compiled this comprehensive information to be as helpful to you as possible. This schedule is also in the handbook, but I'll just go over it really quickly. We will be sending reminder communications throughout the weekend. So after this kickoff, we'll go into a time of live problem pitching, and we'll encourage teams to form tonight after the kickoff. But if not tonight, we advise you to try forming your team at least by 10 a.m. tomorrow, so you can have more time for hacking. The team registration is due by noon tomorrow. And in the afternoon, we'll have a tech talk by Smart Markers, as Aditi mentioned, and a how-to pitch workshop by MIT Hacking Medicine. We will also open signups tomorrow for practice pitches Saturday night, which will be led by the MIT Hacking Medicine team, where you can receive feedback on your draft pitches. The final pitch videos finally are due at noon on Sunday, and we will close out the event with the closing ceremony at 4 p.m. Our wonderful mentors will be available throughout Saturday and Sunday at the times listed on the schedule, or starting at the times listed on the schedule. And in terms of communication, as you all should have been onboarded by now, we are using Discord for all communications. A guide to the breakdown of the Discord channels is provided in the participant handbook. I'm just going to highlight the information desk category really quickly. So the first channel is announcements. You should have been seeing announcements here already. Keep an eye on this for all the latest updates on hackathon events and deadlines. If you have any questions, please use Ask Organizers here. We will not be able to be actively fielding inquiries sent to our email. However, if you have a question that you don't feel comfortable asking publicly, you may DM an organizer, but please keep in mind that you may not get a response as quickly. Next, use these resources channel to share resources with each other, such as articles, helpful references, databases, tutorials, you name it. And finally, for this chunk of channels that all start with the word ask, use these to request help from our wonderful cohort of mentors who have volunteered their time to help you this weekend. Most of your questions will likely go to the general Ask Mentors channel. But if you have specific questions, please see one of the specialized mentor channels, which will be all opening soon. As we explained in the handbook, these channels are not meant for discussion, so we can keep it clear for everyone. To request help, please send a message with your question and tag your team channel, and a mentor will enter your team channel and come to you. We have about 100 amazing mentors who will be monitoring those help channels this weekend, spanning expertise areas from entrepreneurship to marketing to medicine to design and more. Don't hesitate to reach out to them for help, guidance, or feedback. They are very stoked to be helping you this weekend. Finally, it's been really great to see so many of you posting about how excited you are for this event. You can make your own framed participant photo like the one pictured here using the instructions in the participant handbook. And within Discord, there's also opportunity for socializing, and I can see that you guys have already been doing that really well. You can also share screenshots of your team working together in Share a Screenshot, and we might share them on our social media. If you want to take a break from hacking, feel free to hang out in Off Topic and the Participant Lounge voice channel. So after this kickoff concludes, which is very shortly, we will be heading into live problem pitching. Hacking Medicine team members will be moderating pitching in these 4 hackathon themes or tracks. You'll see a message in the announcements channel with 4 Zoom links corresponding to each of the 4 tracks. Please pick just one track to join and pitch the problems that you're passionate about. If you're not quite sure which track your problem pitch best fits in, no worries, as the tracks for this hack are quite fluid. We've posed them more as suggestions to help you focus your problem and solution, as we discussed in the design thinking process. But after forming your team, you can take your idea whichever way it goes, and it's totally fine. In terms of pitching, so since you'll only be able to join one room, rest assured, because after you're done pitching, you'll be able to look through short written descriptions of all the pitches from other tracks and mingle with anybody you would like. Also, if you're wondering if you have to pitch, no, you're not required to pitch. You can definitely just listen and write down pitches that you relate to or you want to work on. But we do encourage you to take this opportunity to try and pitch something that you've observed and you want to see change for. And with that, this concludes our kickoff ceremony. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you in problem pitching next. So remember, check out the announcements channel. This video will be available afterwards in case you want to reference anything, but also all the information you should need to know for the hack will be in the participant handbook. So thank you everyone again for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.